My name is Dasunami.
And I'm Selena. This is a weekly podcast where we discuss the various aspects of sex work, from the sensual to the political.
So welcome to Pay for Play.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Today we have a special guest. Merrick, if you would like to introduce yourself, and please give your pronouns.
Hello, I am Merrick Deville, and my pronouns are she, her.
And what type of sex work do you do?
At the moment, I am doing just porn, like amateur porn, in my house, and mostly by myself, sometimes with partners. I mostly put out content on OnlyFans.
And how did you start out?
In this industry or with OnlyFans?
In this industry, and then after that into OnlyFans.
So I started in the industry when I was like, God, it was either 18 or 19, and I don't remember now because I basically have one foot in the grave at this point. This has been so many years ago. But I was living on my own. I've been on my own since I was a teenager. Like, I graduated high school from a couch. So I was trying to make it in Austin with no family, no safety net, nothing like that. And I was working at pizza places, and I was petty cabbing, and I was cleaning people's houses on the side, like just random people going into their houses, like not knowing what rates to charge, like just bringing a hodgepodge of my own stuff, riding around everywhere on a bicycle in Austin, Texas, which is the hill country, without gears, and like catching buses where I could. And sometimes I was working graveyard shifts, and I was just scrambling to make ends meet and doing anything and everything that I could, working all the time. Oftentimes not having my own place, sleeping on people's couches, that sort of thing. And I was starting to get sick, actually. I was like 18 or 19, and I just realized that I was like burning myself out, which is a little bit ridiculous for someone that young. So I went into a strip club, and I got a position waitressing. And I'm sure you guys all know the joke about waitresses in the strip club.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For the benefit of the audience, you ask what's the difference between a cocktail waitress and a stripper, and the answer is 2 weeks. So I went in, and I was waitressing during the day, and I remember walking in at first and watching someone give a lap dance and just wanting to slap this customer off this girl. Like, my first reaction to ever seeing that was like, oh my God, like disgust and needing to protect her, because I had a lot of these like weird internalized, I think, messages about what sexual expression is okay. And also, it can be, these lap dances can be a little bit creepy. But so it was this really uncomfortable experience for me. But I quickly realized that there's a lot more to the industry than people being creeps or just giving lap dances. And so I stuck around for a little bit, cocktailed during the day for a couple of months, realized that at this like dead end, hole in the wall, failing club, I wasn't making any money, started cocktailing at night, realized that still wasn't making a lot of money, and I started dancing. I just decided one day that I'd had enough. So I started dancing, and on my first shift, I think I had like an old metal band t-shirt that I tore down the front. Then I like tied it into a knot in the front because I thought that would be like, I don't know, cute or something. And I was wearing these huge, like, stretchy, oh God.
It's the Daisy Duke look or something like that.
Yeah, I was going for the Daisy Duke look, but it was this like local Austin like black metal band t-shirt that I'd torn up, and these spandex, almost neon purple, like big underwear. And I think like high heels that I got from like Ulta or something. These like golden, cheap, super sparkly high heels that didn't even fit properly. And I didn't know how to do makeup. And I just looked a mess, right? I didn't know how to do my hair. I didn't know anything about like acrylic fingernails, like nothing. And I just remember getting on stage and feeling and probably looking like a baby giraffe because I'm all leg and I had no idea what to do with my body. And I made $500, and I was sold, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably a bad turn of phrase. I was I got this sense of, for the first time in my life, that I wasn't begging for scraps. And looking back now, I kind of was, but it was a very, very different experience. So I spent the next 6 years working in the club after that.
Nice.
Can you tell us a little bit about like how that atmosphere was like? Any specifically amazing or the opposite experiences that you had during that time that are notable to you and to how you view what you do today?
Sure. So I worked at a place called Expose, which was in Austin, Texas.
Ooh.
And yes, it was definitely spelt like expose. And it was this dirty, rundown, shitty dive bar with naked girls. I mean, you could hardly call this thing a strip club, but I
That
loved it. I
that
absolutely loved
sounds
it.
yeah, that sounds like the one that I dated two girls who were strippers when I was in college, and
Mhm.
sounds like the exact same type they were working in.
Yeah, it was cool. There would be like frat bros and parties, huge parties on the weekends. You would get like during lunch hour, or like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, we like banditos would come in. You would have like older locals during the day. Like there was this huge range of people that would come in. You get business travelers at night, and if you knew what you were doing, and if you were one of the better looking, better performing girls there, I mean, you could make a lot of money. We're not talking like the $250,000, $300,000 that some of the girls up the street at Palazzo were making, but you could do okay.
Mm-hmm. Get by a little
And
more comfortably than those night shifts.
sure. I mean, certainly more than the, $8.50, $9 an hour I was being paid at the diner before. So, Expose was it was my favorite place in the world. When Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, down in Austin, we had, I mean, torrential downpours. Obviously, we didn't get like the brunt like Houston got, but I mean, it was pretty scary. So I was living alone at the time, and I remember going to the club because I was scared that my shitty apartment was going to lose power and lose electricity, and I didn't want to be alone in the dark in the storm. So I
Mm-hmm.
went in to the club. It was a Saturday, I think. I went into Expose, and like I think maybe 3 or 4 girls went into work that night, and we were like, it's going to be dead. We're all just going to hang out. Like they'll waive our house fees, whatever. It was packed. I don't know why. This doesn't make any sense. But it was filled with guys, and there were like 3 girls. I think I sat on my ass all night and did nothing and drank champagne and just talked shit, and I made like well over $1,000. It was absolutely incredible. So
That's
so
actually an awesome
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, so this place was magical in the sense that like you could go in and lose $20 and have an amazing time, or you could go in and make $2,800 and have an amazing time. It was a much smaller club, and it completely falling apart. I remember one time I was with the owner, and we were at the bar facing into, because the bar was all along a back wall, and then facing into the main area where the stage and all the customers are, and one of the ceiling panels fell off fell out of the ceiling and onto a table. And I just remember being like, oh my God. And at the same time, me and him were just, oh my God, like the same reaction. Because, I mean, this club was just falling apart, right? And he didn't care because he owned a bunch of other clubs, and all of his money elsewhere. There was many a rumor that it was just a money laundering front. I cannot confirm or deny, but this place was a fucking mess. But it was my fucking mess, and all
Right.
of the girls there knew
Exactly.
each other. We were like a family, and I've
It's a
never
nice
found that at
sense
any
of
other club.
community that comes with sex work, both online and especially in person in places like this where people are just,
There
getting
can
by.
be. There definitely can be.
Can
Yeah.
be.
I've never found anything at any other club like what we had at Expose, and there were no rules. They just let me get fucking shithoused, and they let me get on stage when it wasn't my turn. And um, there were things that were normal to do at that place that whenever I tried to go to Yellow Rose like a year later, they were like, we can't have you simulating lesbian sex that realistically because we could get a ticket, and it wasn't your turn on stage. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is just like this is how you behave in a strip club. You just drink tequila and you do whatever you want. And you run around, and they were like, "No, ma'am, this is not how it works. You do not do that." So it was kind of like this, like the wild wild west of Austin strip clubs, and like everything goes. And oh man, I remember one time. This will mean nothing to you, but to people who lived in Austin in the scene at the time, there was a woman, and her name was Kitty Steele. Now, Kitty Steele had been dancing in Austin since like 84 or something. And I remember having a friend who had been roommates with her back in the 80s, and she was like, yeah, she's always been a character. And the way I was introduced to her was a day shift at Expo where I came in, it was probably like, I don't know, 9 in the morning, and Rammstein was playing. And I was like, well, oh no, it was probably closer to 11. I don't think we up until 11. But anyway, so I come in, first thing in the morning, and like Rammstein is playing, like Mann gegen Mann or something. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? It's 11 in the morning. Like, what are we doing? And she was stomping around the stage in these like, she was wearing the pleasers that are like the shiny kind of faux pleather, the
Oh,
black
yeah.
shiny, super shiny ones. Like, I mean, these had to be at least 8 inches, and she was just stomping in a circle because our stage was a circle in the middle of the floor, and she at one point ripped her weave off and threw it at a customer, and just tore it out of her head and just threw it at a customer. And I was like, this is all the while German metal is playing, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It was like, this is totally insane. She's like shit faced at 11:30 in the morning doing this, and it was just always weird stuff like that, and it was incredible, like at one point I'd been there long enough, like it was almost like I had tenure, right? Like I couldn't get fired, I had the run of the place, all the regulars knew me. It was like my home away from home.
And how do you transition from something like that to like OnlyFans?
Well, I didn't actually. If Expose had never shut down, I probably would still be there, but my transition was relatively difficult because Expose shut down. It started to like lose steam, and money wasn't being put into it, and they weren't advertising. And so I eventually went over to a place called Palazzo, which is, excuse me, owned by the same person right up the street. Now, Palazzo is really difficult because Palazzo desperately wants to be Las Vegas, and it's not. And it's Palazzo is a place where I applied like 4 or 5 times, and I got turned away constantly, every time. And I don't, if you guys don't know this, the way strip clubs turn people away is they don't say, no, we don't want you to work here. They go, oh, well, a lot of girls are working here, come back later. So they kept doing this to me over and over and over and over again, until finally I went in with my ex-husband one night. And my ex-husband worked for a very, very, very large winery that sold them many, 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 many cases of one of their best-selling wines. So I went in with him, and then they were like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess you can work here. And so I
Oh,
started
wow.
working. I started working at Palazzo. Um, I didn't fit in. I was only working there as a favor to him. So I didn't fit in. I didn't have a fake tan. I wasn't blonde. I didn't have any plastic surgery at the time. Um, it was very difficult. I was not what the customer base was looking for. I was not what they were, expecting. And it wasn't really a stage performance club. Whereas at expose, I made a lot of my money off stage because I did a ton of pole, but I wasn't my stage performance has never been like very technical athletic pole. I've always tried to do it in a way that is very graceful and blends a lot of different styles of dance. So I pick very sensual, slow music, and or I pick very fast metal and do like sort of a performance. But um, I've always put on, I think, a pretty good show and been told consistently over the years that I put on a really good show. So I was used to making tons and tons and tons of stage money. Well, Palazzo is not like that. You can walk on the ceiling at Palazzo and people will clap politely and they'll go, "Oh, wow," and they don't tip. So I had to figure out a new way to survive there. Well, turns out I'm actually okay at selling VIP. What I'm not so good at is getting fucked out of my VIP because I'm not paying the right managers 400, 500, 600 a night. I don't play
Wow.
that game.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I'm not interested in that. I'm also not interested in selling drugs. So there weren't really there wasn't really a path for me to succeed there. I would sell VIPs and then I would get pulled out of the VIPs that I sold and have the manager place other girls in it. So I think the third time this happened to me was when I was just done. And I had started an OnlyFans, I think back in like May of 2019, and I wasn't doing shit on it. I didn't care. I didn't think of it as a business. I didn't take it seriously. It was just a little thing to do on the side. Because I'd been running a Snapchat before that, which, again, was just something I did on the side. I would sell a year for like, I don't know, 150 bucks. Or I would sell like, it would sell for like a lifetime for $150. Because I didn't have any damn business sense. Or I would try to get 30 a month, which I still can't believe looking back now that I got 30 a month for that because I didn't get a fucking Snapchat, you know? But, so I met my ex-husband and he, um, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say ex-husband. We're still married. He's still like a really, really good friend of mine. But, he taught me how to take it more seriously. He's like, listen, if you want to actually make money off of this, you can't just, use it as like this little side thing you do. You have to think about advertising. You have to think about who your target audience is. You have to post things regularly. You need to be consistent, that sort of thing. And I said, okay, well, I'm having a lot of problems at Palazzo. I'm not really liking it, so I guess I will try to take it more seriously. And so I just started accepting every single friend request that was sent to me on Facebook at the time. Because I was only on Facebook. I was on
Hmm.
Facebook and Instagram. So I started just accepting every friend request on Facebook, which is a dangerous, dangerous game to play because
Oh
there are
yeah.
some weird people on Facebook. And then I started finding all these groups, like groups with hundreds of thousands of people in them. And just finding ways to like plug my OnlyFans. And
Right.
I've been kicked out, I've been banned from so many Facebook groups. Um,
Oh my
it's
god.
ridiculous. And so I started to
I
build a
was gonna say
following.
Facebook is a very strong choice to start out on.
Well, so this was like, I mean, at this point, this was almost 2 years ago. This was after FOSTA and SESTA, but it was around the time that people were starting to take FOSTA and SESTA seriously, and around the time that social media was starting to crack down pretty heavily.
Yeah, wasn't
Um,
that the Tumblr year?
Um, that was 2018 that happened. So this would have been the year afterwards, because FOSTA and SESTA was passed on April 11th of 2018, I believe.
I think it
Feel
was then, and then the Tumblr thing happened fairly
Shortly
soon
after.
after.
shortly after. So I don't really know anything about Tumblr because I've always thought of Tumblr as a cursed wasteland of incredibly hyperbolic and scary takes. But let's see. FOSTA. So I don't know anything about when that banned porn, but anyway, so I started thinking of OnlyFans as a business and as a viable option to make money instead of something that I just kind of have going on the side. And so I continued to go to Palazzo while I worked on this, but I also poured a lot of time and effort into building up my OnlyFans, or building up my OnlyFans via building up my Facebook and building up my Instagram presence. And it went okay. I was probably making like, I don't know, I think the most I ever made was like $2,000. On average, I was probably making like 1,300, 1,400 a month from OnlyFans.
Which isn't enough to live
Oh,
off of.
that's not even enough to pay my rent at the time, much less any of my utilities or other living expenses or anything. So I continued to strip for a while, and then I quit. I kind of left the industry, I guess. I got I got sick back in 2016, and then I'm just kind of on and off sick now. This is just something that I have to deal with. And we don't need to get too into it, but I have several chronic conditions that I discovered. So
Mhm.
sometimes dancing on stage is just not possible because of my conditions. So I
Right.
continued to push through for several years, and it was not fun. But eventually, I just left. I just needed a break. Couldn't do it. I was miserable. I wasn't able to make money when I was going in and being fucking miserable, and I was getting social anxiety that I never used to get before, and I just took a break. So I bartended for a little bit, and I quit working for a little bit actually. I think John was taking care of things, and then No Comrades Under 1K happened.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was your startup?
Yes. So I made the Twitter account in April, I believe, but I didn't really utilize it till January. And then mid-January or early January, I'm not sure. No Comrades Under 1K was a hashtag that happened where the goal was to get all socialists to at least 1,000 followers.
Right.
Well, so I tried it. I hopped onto it. I was like, okay, and I got 1,000 followers like within a couple of hours. And I think I had started with like 100. So I was like, wow, okay, cool. And I was like, hey guys, like this shit worked for me. Boost this, whatever. Let me know. I'll follow you back. And so I did that, and it just never stopped. And by the time mid September rolled around, I had 30,000 Twitter followers.
Nice.
And
Wow.
my OnlyFans absolutely blew up from that. Um, I will say one thing about socialists and communists and anarchists is that they did at the time.
No, yeah, I was gonna
um,
say, might want to preface that.
they
Yeah.
did at the time show me an extraordinary sense of community and wanting to take care of and help out those who they perceive to have their same political goals. So that was honestly a life changing experience for me. I was not destitute the way I was when I was younger, but I was not doing great. We were struggling. We were getting behind on bills. I mean, I think at one point we were 2 months behind on the mortgage. When you get 3 months behind, that's when they start talking about foreclosure. So we were not doing great. He had been fired. My husband, who I'm now separated from, had been fired from his job for marrying me in 2018, and
For
he didn't.
marrying you?
Yes. So he worked for one of the top 10 wineries in the nation,
Mhm.
and photos of our wedding leaked. Someone leaked them to the owner of the winery. He was told explicitly not to date me because I was not in line with the image that the company wanted, that it would hurt his career because I was a stripper, and because of what I look like. So photos from our wedding leaked, and the owner of the winery said that I looked cheap and that he had cheapened the winery by marrying me.
Holy shit.
Wow. I mean,
So,
we can get
yeah.
into all kinds of sex worker discrimination, but that is a great example of how not even the person who does the sex work is safe necessarily from that kind of stuff, but also just even being related or being just with someone who's a sex worker can threaten your livelihood. How
Yeah.
crazy is that?
Yeah. So what they ended up doing was they claimed that he had spent company money on me when we got married, because we went to Vegas together and got married. He was working in Vegas that weekend. We had receipts that showed that every single dollar we spent on me was from our own money. I mean, were
Hmm.
very, very, very careful to make sure that we didn't spend company money on me and kept records of everything. And their lawyer was just not interested in seeing those. And he basically was like, sent an email after the phone call. He didn't think to record the phone call because they started the phone call under the guise of, "Oh, I hear congratulations are in order," and it very quickly turned into not quite "you're fired," but just shit talking me and him essentially.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and then they phone call ended, not so great, and he received an email from a lawyer. I think it was like, either it was like the next day or something,
And
and
it's not.
they tried to block him from getting unemployment.
Oh
And
my God.
we found out that they were saying that he spent company money because when unemployment tried to file with them, they said, no, well, he spent company funds. And when the Texas Unemployment Office was like, that's interesting, you're going to need to prove that, the winery never was able to send anything back because
Of course
it
not.
Yeah.
didn't happen. So we did end up getting he did end up get he was able to get his unemployment, but yeah, they tried to block us from getting that.
Yeah,
And
and
then
of course,
for
there's no laws or anything protecting sex
no,
workers or
no.
even people related to sex workers.
Nope.
So,
I mean, what they did was definitely illegal. I mean, you can't fire someone for who they marry. That's not you can't do that.
Yeah.
But they can. I don't know if California is a right to work state. I know Texas is, but they can definitely just say, well, we didn't like this aspect of your job performance, and they don't
yeah.
Oh yeah,
necessarily
it's
need
just
to
that
prove
easy.
it. So, then, I mean, I guess there was some sort of like underlying tension, I think, between him and I believe the person above him for quite some time, and that marrying me was kind of just like the
The
gotcha
last
moment,
one.
I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah, it was like, because they so anyway, so um he tried for about, oh, I don't know, like 2 years to get back into his industry, and started hearing rumors that things were being said behind his back, essentially. So not only did they fire him, try to block unemployment, but like went around to
To make sure no
other
one else would
to
hire
make
him.
sure no one else would hire him.
How
Yeah.
fucked up is that
Yeah.
though? For real, just
Yeah.
thinking about it.
So I was really sick at the time, and it was like one of the most stressful things. I mean, this was 2 days after we got married and a month after we bought a house.
I mean, big
So,
steps that you need to have a job to afford, you know?
yeah, I mean, we just cleared out like 40 something thousand, cleared out our savings to buy the house. So we had nothing, no safety net, nothing. And it was really difficult. So it wasn't until like August or September that I started to actually make money with the OnlyFans, like make enough to live and get by.
Through
And
the
now,
hashtag.
yeah, because of the hashtag, and then also because like I made some posts that received a lot of attention
Right.
early on.
Well, all publicity. So,
Sort of. People say that all publicity is good publicity, but I would
uh,
actually say that,
Occasionally, it's not.
yeah, I would actually say that a lot of the attention I've received, um, because of sex work and because of being a sex worker has been very mixed.
Yeah, I was wondering, speaking of your online stuff, without getting into any drama, how much do you think you've dealt with specifically because you're a sex worker, and what kind of impact did this have on you?
So this is a difficult question to answer because I am always in some sort of controversy. I'm a very polarizing figure, I guess. I think it's a little silly, but it's hard to.
Pinpoint how much of it is really specifically because of that?
Yes, I don't want to be someone who says, well, I'm getting all this criticism and I'm getting all this pushback and I'm getting all this hate because of my identity. Because that is just a way to not have to reflect or take any sort of responsibility.
Hmm.
I see people do it a lot when their actions to me seem clearly obvious and are being clearly and obviously communicated to them, and I never ever want to be one of those people.
Of course.
So it's very difficult for me to analyze this accurately. I do know that before my first big controversy, the only complaints that I ever got were people upset that because I am a sex worker and because I am openly sexual, and because I'm, a little silly and I don't take things super seriously, that I was superficial, that I was an idiot, that I was watering down sexism or watering down leftism, that I was inviting because I use my body to get attention, and then from that attention I then talk about my political views, that because of that I basically am a lookist and I think that leftism is about being hot, which is
Kind of the opposite.
dumb.
Yeah.
It's a very dumb way to look at that.
Yeah.
But that's a narrative that has like really stuck around and that people have clung to and will like desperately say about me. And it's been like 9 months now and it just won't go away.
And what
So
kind of effect did this have on you, really? The
I
stuff
mean,
the harassment that's specifically related to your looks or to your form of work, you know.
it's tough because it's tough because you can't like disprove it. If someone says, "Oh, you did this to this person," or "Oh, you said this," I can go, "Well, here's the screenshot, or here's the clip of me actually saying something else, or here's how you should properly interpret the statement." But when people say, "Well, you're just a grifter," or "Well, you believe this or you believe that," about intrinsically about yourself or about other people or how your job relates to politics or your advocacy, you can't really go, well, here's a screenshot to disprove that. You can go, well,
Right.
here are my thoughts on this sort of complicated issue and the way these things tie together. And that person can either accept it or they can say you're lying, or they can pivot and just say something else. And
Hmm.
what I almost exclusively see is either pivoting to some other point of contention they have with me, or people just saying that I'm lying about my own thoughts.
Yeah.
um, so
So,
it's very difficult. There are a lot of people who I do think probably just kind of think that I'm a dumb whore, but they dress it up in a
Oh yeah.
more
yeah.
socially acceptable and palatable way. There are some people that just come out and say it though, like Marxist swerves who will say like you're the lowest of the low, you're the lumpen proletariat, you whores lack class consciousness. Like you see some stuff like that sometimes and you're like, you know what? At least you're telling the goddamn truth about how you feel.
Yeah, I've run into a couple of those. Those aren't fun.
No,
Um,
no, it's definitely not fun, but I at least appreciate it more than like the moral fucking grandstanding that other people do where they're like, you said this and so therefore what you really meant was this, and you
yeah.
had this experience but you spoke about it in the presence of someone who faces more oppression than you, even though that's not the topic at hand. Like there's just so many mental gymnastics that people will jump through to find a way that what I'm saying or doing is bad. And what I do seem to notice is a lot of anytime there's any sort of like sexual thing related to me, it becomes a scandal. Like I've already had 2 sex scandals.
And there's a lot of body shaming that I've seen play into it as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty open about the fact that I've had cosmetic work done, and that seems to just enrage people for some reason.
Oh yeah, so much. I've seen way too much, actually.
Yeah.
So, I do want to get into your political beliefs if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, one of the things that you had said that I'd seen that I was really interested in was the idea of like sexual mutual aid, or how, basically, how does sex work function under a non-capitalist economy? I have my ideas, but I'd really like your I'd really like to hear your take on it.
Sure. So sexual mutual aid is a really goofy phrase. And I think that's what drew a lot of attention to it in the first place, was that I may have been the first person to tweet that phrase. I don't know. But it certainly seemed to get a lot of attention. And it also seemed like it was pretty widely misunderstood. Um, the background is I had tweeted sex work will still exist under communism, and a bunch of communists got really big mad at me because they were like, no, because the word work only means labor in exchange for wages under a capitalist society. So you can't call it sex work, it won't be sex work, because you can't say work like that. So I was like,
Sexual mutual aid. We'll go with
okay.
that then.
Well, so I was like, well, I'm not going to say sexual labor will exist because that sounds fucking horrible. I'm not saying that. I'm not tweeting sexual labor or anything, right? So, I was talking to some people about this, and I was like, what do you like? How is a better way to phrase this? Like, how is a better way to communicate my thoughts that I think that the trade of sexual services or activities will still exist in some form or another. Like, I think people will still want to contribute to their communities in a sexual way
Especially
because
considering how it's always existed.
it's literally always existed. Yeah. And I think that you can't really go back either. So some people like to say that it's not the oldest job in the world and that's a myth. And I've never seen anyone give any proof for that not being the oldest job in the world. I've never seen any proof of that being a myth, but I'm willing to say, okay, let's say that that's wrong. Let's say sex work, prostitution, if you will, is not the oldest job in the world, right? You can't really go back. We know that we now have the option and that people for a long time have been engaging in full service work for things that they wanted. Now, right now, it's often in the form of collecting the resource of money. So we collectively know that this is a thing that we can do, and I don't think that we're ever going back. Like, that's not one of those things that we can collectively be like, we're just going to forget that that existed. Sorry, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
And
even in countries that have been, I guess, communist or socialist, sex work has existed in those. Maybe it was to find like trade for protection or trade for goods that you might not have otherwise gotten, luxury stuff like that. But yeah, it's always gonna
And even with all the
exist.
discrimination that they had to face, especially during those times and in those societies, still persisted.
so I think that there will always be people that are interested in the idea of sexual services from a perspective of giving and from a perspective of it being almost a therapeutic tool. So this was based off of things that people have told me and my own experiences in the strip club. And I think the thing that got really, 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 really misconstrued was that I'm not making a prescriptive claim when I
Hmm.
say I think in a post capitalist society, there would still be people that wanted to engage in sexual services as seen from their viewpoint as like a good, positive thing to provide to their community. I'm not saying it should be that way. I'm saying that this is what I think that we'll end up seeing.
Hmm.
Right.
So I was making a descriptive claim about a hypothetical post-capitalist society somewhere in the future.
That none of
Um,
us might ever see.
right, that none of us might ever see. So I've actually had people say, "Yeah, I would want to do full service, like even if it wasn't a job, like that's okay, like that's fine." And as I've spoken to more and more people about it after the fallout, more and more people have been like, "Yeah, that actually sounds pretty cool. I think that that would be something I would want to do."
I mean, there
And
are things like that exist today. Even I mean, of course, there's
right.
still money that goes with them, but like, there's
Well,
therapists that use forms of sex work, and then there's people who um might
I
have a
mean,
harder time.
well, even without this, even if we take money out of the equation, what do you guys think Gone Wild on Reddit is? That's people posting their nudes for
Just
free.
because they want to.
Just because they want to. Yeah, exactly. If we lived in a post-capitalist society, I would still make porn. I think people need porn. I think taking all sexual aids out of a community that has out of a society that has like existed with them for as long as we can remember, and then one day being like, well, nope, we just don't have these anymore. That to me sounds like a net bad that would have bad outcomes. So even if I was out there all alone, just me, I would still want to make porn. That's still sex work, right? So, but we can't call it
Mhm.
work. So what do we call it? And I was talking to someone and they were like, well, it could be considered a form of mutual aid, right? Like you are giving something to the community without expecting something directly in exchange back that you think would create a net positive. There still needs to be people who create sex toys. There still needs to be people who model for sex toys. There's still probably people that would want to like spend time and be a companion for other people. Like when I worked at the strip club and I had regulars, one of the things that my regulars liked was when I just talked to them and like held their hands or like held them. I had a guy who would come in and what I would spend most of my time doing was just holding him. That's
I've
it.
actually heard a lot of stories really similar to this, like people who just lost their wives or
Hmm.
people who are going through a specifically emotionally hard time where you want to talk to a stranger, but in a way that feels like it might be more intimate, that
Hmm.
can help emotionally. And
Yeah.
I've heard so many stories from sex workers, just like I just talk to these guys or these girls, and
Hmm.
that's just what it is for the next 2 hours, and they're regulars, and I help them.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think that that's really noble. And I remember like at the end of these nights when I would have regulars come in, like I would just be fucking drained. Like it's really emotionally draining, and I have a lot of respect for people that would want to do something like that in whatever capacity we're talking about. Now, do I think that there would be a lot of people who would want to do full service? No, I don't. I think that it would be a very, very, very small number of people that would be interested in something like that. But I wasn't making the claim that all sex workers now are going to be free fucks for anyone who wants them, and all incels are going to be assigned. Like that has absolutely nothing,
Exactly.
no
Yeah.
relevance whatsoever to do with what I was talking about. Um, but it was fine and people were really understanding what I was saying, and they were, my post was amicable, people were nice on it, and then someone was like, well, I don't get it. How is that anything different than a pity fuck? And I was like, well, I think if someone is going to volunteer their time, their attention, their compassion, potentially their body to a situation where they are providing a service for someone else, I think it's pretty fucking disrespectful of you to label them a pity fuck.
And I
Um,
mean, what they're doing is genuinely admirable. Like
Admirable,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was like,
to just write it off as, oh, they just feel bad and this is what they want to do to help. Like some people just genuinely enjoy helping others. Why are you being such an
well,
asshole?
why are you being an asshole about it? Yeah, exactly. So I was like, no, I disagree with that. I mean, I think that there's like a certain level of sacrifice that goes into like giving, um, your time and your compassion and your empathy to another person. So I don't think that and I should never have used the word sacrifice. But I unfortunately did because I'd only been on Twitter for a month and I didn't know how Twitter worked at that time. And a bunch of radfems found my post, and if you guys don't know, radfems are swerfs and turfs. And I'm
Oh,
not like,
I'm
oh, they're me. Like they like proudly are like overtly swerfs and turfs.
yeah,
So they
I'm
found
fully
it
aware of
and they
them.
Because
decided
it's
that
all about saving the women or something.
yeah, well, it's all about hating men. But so they decided that what I meant was that incels needed to be assigned a sex worker to abuse and rape by the government, which was um,
Because that's, of course,
fucking
easily
insane.
extrapolable from that.
Yeah, which is absolutely fucking insane. And then people, leftists who didn't like me, who found me annoying, who thought I was cringe, whatever, really jumped on that and ran with it. And this tweet went everywhere. I was dragged by every fucking corner of the internet. I became the main character, and it was, did not matter what I said, did not matter how much I clarified. It was pretty fucking bad. A lot of
Right.
people decided that I was an advocate for rape, that I was an incel. They decided that any guy who misinterpreted my post, was an incel. Any guy that had questions about my post was an incel. Any guy who said something that they didn't agree with was an incel, and that I was directly responsible for incels harming sex workers because of my tweets, that I needed to be held accountable, that I needed to apologize, that I mean, it was it was a lot. And I
One
got dragged
thing,
for days and days and days. I mean, this probably went on for a week. And then on the tail end of that, I was hit with the sexual harassment allegations. So it was, I think what I said was perfectly reasonable. But I think that can be up to you to decide.
Yep.
of course. I would say, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. I would say I don't like how easily we've begun to throw the word incel around because a lot of sex workers rely on clients that feel comfortable purchasing sex work, and a lot of these people who are called incels lately, I see, don't actually fit the definition of incel. They are just paying for sex work online, or they're nice to a sex worker online or in person, and that gets them that label pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think this is something that I talked about. This is something I talked about pretty early on in my Twitter career that was not not really met with a lot of agreement. I was kind of like, listen, you really alienate people. You really alienate a lot of men who probably are not incels. You kind of muddy the water. You kind of make the term not mean anything when you throw this around, and it just to anyone. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the incel community is a very specific thing. They have some pretty disgusting beliefs, and I know when when I'm interacting with an incel, it's pretty obvious. They use very specific terminology, and to just label anyone as that kind of makes it to where it just doesn't mean anything anymore.
So I think part of the way we fix all this is to destigmatize sex work overall. I was wondering if you had any ideas on, or any suggestions on how we can destigmatize sex work, or how you can help sex workers who are in need of this type of stuff, how we protect them.
Sure. I think first and foremost, the way we protect sex workers is that we fight against the legislation that's. Excuse me, sorry. Maybe not first and foremost. I think first and foremost, should um you should find local organizations. I know SWAP does some good work, or just find ways to support actual sex workers, listen to what sex workers have to say. Um, I think the way we normalize it is that we just continue to talk about it. I think things like this are really good in terms of normalizing it. The fact that both of you are, I don't know if either of you are sex workers or not, or I don't know if the
Yes,
whole
we are
thing is
both
that you
sex
both
Yeah.
are.
workers.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I didn't know if we were saying that on this program or not. Okay,
Yes, you're good.
cool, cool. So I've personally been doing this and been out online doing this since 2014, and I have seen a dramatic change in the way that we're spoken about and the way we're received. Um, I think the more that we are honest, the more that we are open, the more that we say, "Hey, yeah, this is what I do. It's not a big deal." The more we begin to destigmatize it, right?
Hmm.
So, um, I I think being our authentic selves is another really good way to do it too, because as much as I get like kind of shit on and pushed around for not separating my sex worker account from my personal account, this has been like a huge point of contention that people have with me, is that they just want me to make a separate sex worker account where I only do sex work stuff, and they never want me um, to engage it in my political stuff at all. I've had a lot of people tell me sex doesn't belong in politics, or that I am, by talking about politics and being openly sexual, I'm making other women in the political sphere unsafe. I'm I'm um, I'm adulterating the integrity of the topics I'm discussing, um, or
But
I'm bringing.
but like sex work is political.
Oh, I know, I know. Oh,
It's just
I'm
another
very
way to
aware.
push sex workers out of the conversation or sex work out of the conversation.
Sure, there's been a lot of, I don't know if you guys have noticed this on Twitter, but there's been a lot of like, there's so many sex pests on the left, and sexuality is like not okay. Like
Being horny is anti-revolutionary.
horny is anti-revolutionary. It's
That is
like
my favorite one.
the fucking LARP on that statement. Holy shit. Yeah, sure. And I think by just being our authentic selves, and by saying, yes, I do sex work, but I also want to have a raccoon ranch, and I also love jigsaw puzzles, and I also care about leftist politics, and I'm also super into tattoos, and I grew up riding horses, and my favorite genre is horror, and I really think it's important that we ground our axioms, like by fleshing ourselves out and showing that we are kind and thoughtful, and that we are intelligent, and some of us are really educated. I know I'm not. I've got half of a Texas public high school education, but I danced with women who were doctors. I know women who have PhDs that have OnlyFans.
Yeah, like I
You
have a
know,
law degree. Uh,
that's crazy. You are,
Datsunami
wow.
is working on becoming a vet. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So I think the more that we are authentically and uncompromisingly ourselves, I think that we are our own advocates. And we're not going to see people stand up for us and treat us as full, well rounded human beings until more of us start to say, I'm not ashamed of what I do. I don't hide what I do. And what I do is exactly that. It's just what I do. It's not who I am. It's not an integral part of my identity. Um,
Yeah, it's
and it's
about reminding
okay.
people that sex workers do things other than sex work, and the people that you live around are probably could be sex workers. When you go to the store, you probably run into a sex worker and don't even know it, or you go to the doctor's office. One of those nurses might have an OnlyFans or might be a stripper.
So this is something that I remind people of, is I say, to people that find that they don't agree with what I'm doing, or who think it's like this very like niche small industry, what I always tell them is, sex workers. You don't know that you do, but you absolutely do. And they know you. So the more that you talk openly, or you shit on sex workers openly, you're sending that message to the people in your life that you have a personal relationship with, that they can't trust you, and that they can't respect you because you don't respect them. So this is like something that I really try to say to people, and I think that by being uncompromisingly ourselves, that we start to normalize things. And I think the other thing that we can really do to help normalize it is really reward the good behavior we see. And that maybe sounds like duh, but I definitely see people like try to be allies or try to be advocates, and they kind of fuck it up sometimes.
mhm.
And sometimes, or when people say like prostitution or call you prostitutes or whatever, sometimes instead of me being like, hey, thank you for sticking me, if it's instead of being like, don't call me prostitute, that's a slur, call me full service sex worker, like sometimes that can be your go-to, but you have to remember like, oh, this was said in the context of defending you. So, I like to try to go, hey, thank you so much. I really appreciated that you stood up for me in that situation. Just, so going forward, typically that's considered a slur. Typically you would say this. So I've really done a lot of work in kind of moderating the way in which I speak to people. And I found that that has really good results. Um,
Yeah,
So,
reminding people the right way to do things while also being encouraging them of them trying to do the right
mhm.
things is always going to be positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
positive reinforcement works really well. So, I mean, those are just the things that I've found. I don't really know I don't really know another way to give us visibility. It seems like we're in a time and in a moment where we are having a lot of visibility, and so I think the best thing that we can do with that is to set the example and with our own behavior and with our own words, as to the kind of people we want to be perceived to be, and the way that we want to be treated. And I think another big thing is setting boundaries. Um, because I think people think that because we sell nudes or because we do porn or because we're strippers, they can just talk to us any way they want. And that's not the case. You know, guys will send me dick pics constantly. And I actually will open them and I'll respond and I'll be like, this isn't appropriate. What you just did is the digital equivalent of exposing yourself to me, which is a sex crime. It's this is a violation of boundaries. Like I'll explain boundaries to people all day long, and like not everyone is going to have the mental or emotional wherewithal to do that constantly. But I think that something that we can try to keep in mind, is just trying to set and correct people in a in as nice as a way possible of what our boundaries are.
Because, yeah, of course, you don't have to reply to every sexual harassment you get online with reasonability, but, you know.
No, of course not. Of course not. And there are definitely cases where it's probably best for you to not respond to things. There are definitely people that have said and done awful shit to me online that I just block and move on. Um, and that's sometimes the safest and best thing for you to do. But when and where I see a reasonable opportunity for me to engage and to educate someone, I try to do that.
Mhm.
So I think, we just need to take advantage of the discussions that are being had around us right now and try to control the conversations as much as possible in a way that's not demeaning, in a way that's not fuck you, pay me, and snotty, but in a way that
Mhm.
humanizes and well, I guess normalizes us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, one of the things that I have a problem with, and I kind of want to get your opinion on, is whenever I see sex work discussed online or just in circles by politicians or anything, they always conflate all sex work with prostitution. I was wondering if A, does that bother you, and B, if it does, like how do we fix that? Because for me, I don't do prostitution, but I still do some form of sex work. So
Right. So, this is something that every single time I speak on this topic, I always make it a point to explain to people that sex work comes in different shapes and sizes. I always say, listen, you may or may not, but probably do associate sex work with full service work, probably from people like walking tracks, walking the streets, right? So, and I like to tell people, listen, you don't know this, but you have been inundated your whole life with a lot of negative propaganda about sex workers, about what they are and what they do.
In movies,
So,
especially.
yeah, you don't have positive messaging about sex work. You just don't. And as far as like in media goes, um,
Mhm.
I can't think of a single like movie where there's just a girl and she just has OnlyFans and like that's just her job and it's not about that, right? Even movies like Dancing at the Blue Iguana, like that looked at us as people, but it kind of looked at those girls as like troubled people. So
yeah, not every sex worker has a daddy issue.
Well, right. But so, what I like to tell people is, look, you may not think that you need to unlearn a lot of bias, but you do. Because your entire life you've been fed a narrative that we are either um,
Drug
riddled with,
addicts.
yeah, we're drug addicts, we're riddled with STDs, or we're dead victims on Law and Order, right? So, um, you need to understand that there's sex work is an umbrella term, right? So, and I'll tell people this means stripping, this means porn, this means if you use Sext Panther to sext guys, you're a sex worker. If you're, and this is, I think, the thing that really kind of puts things into perspective for people. I go, you know all those hot Instagram girls? The ones who are always on a beach somewhere and they're just in bikinis, and then they have like a website, and you go to the website and you can buy hot pictures of them in bikinis or whatever, or they sell calendars. Those are sex workers.
I would even argue that people who draw porn are a form of sex work.
Yeah, you could. Sure. I guess you could make that argument. I've never really delved too much into that, but it's so much more than what you think it is, and so it does bother me that there does seem to be this conflation. But that's why I always make it a point to make sure to talk about these things, and show that they are different. And I also do like to tell people, listen, um, sex trafficking, survival sex work, and a more voluntary form of sex work are all three different things on their own as well. I think that it's also
Mm-hmm.
very important to clarify that point. When I started, I was a survival sex worker. I didn't really feel like I had any other choices. I didn't have any sort of stability. I didn't really have any other options. That was different than what I do now. But both of those things are different than being sex trafficked, because sex trafficking is rape and slavery. It's not work.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Would you, online, I know that there's a lot of people who like to compare the things they go through, and I notice that sometimes people will say, well, you can't really call yourself a sex worker or talk about sex work because the only sex work you do is online, and that's just not as dangerous as on the street, which I'm sure a lot of us recognize as true. But what would you have to say to that kind of thing? That you're less of a sex worker because you only do sex work online?
Um, I would say that that sounds like someone who doesn't really understand the full picture. It can be extremely dangerous to do sex work online. I have a haven't really talked about this openly yet, but it would appear that I have a stalker right now, and I'm only doing sex work online. Um, we have all seen what has happened to me. We've all
Oh, yeah.
seen. Yeah, I mean, I think my harassment has been a pretty spectacular display of public witch burning. So
Mm-hmm.
I do believe a lot of that has been driven by who I am and by what I do. I get revenge porn posted of me on Twitter pretty
With
regularly,
fake titles, too.
with fake titles too. It gets posted on Reddit pretty regularly. It gets posted on Twitter pretty regularly. Um, it's dangerous in different ways. I mean, yeah, if you're getting into a stranger's car, there's a different immediate danger. But to say that there's not pretty severe consequences from doing sex work online, I think is pretty deeply ignorant. People can people can get fired from their jobs, their other
That's a great
jobs.
example. Lots of
People.
people have gotten in the news for losing their
Mhm.
jobs over having an OnlyFans.
Sure. You do porn, and 10 years later, you become a teacher, and then you're highly publicly fired for being a teacher because you made a video 10 years ago, and then you get your name in the
Mm-hmm.
fucking newspaper. Porn stars who made it big have to have armed security when they go out in public. I mean, you still are putting images of your naked body on the internet. Blackmail is a thing that people have to think about. People's parents find out about this and pull in support for them while they're in college.
Oh, yeah, personal experience with that actually. A whole community witch burning thing, kind of similar to yours, except more in person while I was away at college. Lots of that stuff happens very frequently. People
I'm so
aren't
sorry.
afraid. Oh, it's okay. I mean, you learn to get through these things and how to better protect yourself online, but at the same time, it's a very genuine concern a lot of people have. Like, I can't say there's a day that goes by where I'm not anxious that it's going to get back out again, or that I'm going to hear my name is going to be brought up at a high school that I haven't been into in like 2 or 3 years, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I would say that my anxiety and my stress levels related to my job, now that I do OnlyFans, um, are exponentially larger than when I was doing full service work. Because when I was stripping, I was also doing full service work. Um, it's just different stressors and different kind of dangers. Actually, you know what? It
Mhm.
is the same kind of dangers. It's just the immediacy with which it's different.
Yeah, because your life it can still be at threat or at in danger doing it
Oh, yeah.
online. It just might take a little longer for them to find where you live or take a little longer to actually show up and do the thing, but it's still
Sure.
there.
Sure, and sex work online is forever. The stuff I did
Oh
in the
yeah.
club, if I never told anyone about that online, no one would know. But my OnlyFans, the images that and the videos that I put on my OnlyFans, that's forever. This is
Mhm.
just as every bit of sex work as stripping or full service. Absolutely.
I really appreciate that response.
Yeah.
Do you have like any specific like laws that you've heard of or places and countries that you either appreciate or really dislike how they approach sex work?
Yeah, so I actually have a lobbyist that I know who right now is working on getting laws passed up in New England where if you are a sex worker and if you call the police because you have been attacked or because something is happening to you, you are no longer at risk of going to jail. I think that's really, really, really cool, and
That is
that's
amazing.
yeah, there is absolutely progress being made in this country. It's just slow, but it's happening. The other thing that I would like to note, I think my final meme is look up the what is it? It's Stop Internet Sexual Exploitation Act. That's something that I think people need to be aware about. We need to be writing, calling, emailing, harassing our Congress members about because it's basically a bill that looks like it might force our ability to do porn and it might force our ability to advertise our OnlyFans off the internet. And if you're not familiar with it, essentially they are going to create databases where if you've ever been a victim of revenge porn, you go in one database, and if you've ever acted in a porn, you go into another, and you can't be in both. So basically, as soon as you're put into the victim database, you can never appear in a porn ever again. So if you work in porn and things that you don't particularly want get leaked online, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it because if you report it or if you try to do anything about it, you get put in that database and then you can no longer work anymore. So you
Which
either get,
creates a whole nother police arresting sex workers issue where it's just
yeah,
like, well, if they get caught, they're just not gonna be able to do it again, and then where's their livelihood go?
Yeah, which is
yeah,
why we need decriminalization rather than just legalization.
I agree. I completely agree. You know, it also enforces social media companies. They need to have 24/7 fully staffed call centers where people can report if there is like some sort of revenge porn up for them, and the social media companies have to pay for them, have to pay for their upkeep, pay to keep them staffed, and any sort of like report of revenge porn has to come down, I think, within 3 hours, which sounds great. But the problem is that rather than eat these costs, this is essentially going to push sex work off the internet because
Yeah,
companies are not going to
because
do it.
No,
they'll
of
push
course
it
not.
on to the sex workers, and that basically prices almost every sex worker out of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So my final meme would be to look into that and to tell your local or your state rep or whatever that you don't want that to happen and that you think it's a very bad decision.
So, we had Merrick on today, and I think that went really well. We appreciate you having coming on today.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on it. It's really cool. It's been nice to talk to other sex workers.
Yes, it always is.
Is there anything you would like to plug, Merrick?
Oh, yeah. You guys can find me on Twitch or YouTube, Merrick Deville, and my Merrick Deville Twitter account was suspended. I was nuked for telling Cassandra Fairbanks that I was going to become her dad, or no, I'm sorry, I was gonna fuck her dad, become her stepmother, and take her internet away. So that account was nuked by Twitter, and my friend may or may not have a new Twitter account at Eldritch Mother, where you may or may not be able to have information passed along to me. So you guys can find me
Go,
in those spaces.
go follow Merrick's friend.
Yep, and we hope you all enjoyed this, and you can check out either links in the description or you can share this around. You know, everything that we appreciate.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on.
So, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Pay for Play.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us, please give us a follow and share us around. You can follow us on Twitter at pay_for_play, where you can find more information on the topics that we talk about and links to our resources.
We appreciate each and every listener. Until next time.